And hello everyone, welcome to the stream. Sorry for a little bit of a start-stop there. We were having some trouble on the bit rate with YouTube, and I gave it a shot at starting and stopping the whole mechanism. Unfortunately, YouTube is now also making it so they change up your stream keys and do all sorts of other crazy stuff when you start doing that sort of thing, and so you can't just sort of like pick it up again where you left off. You have to kind of create a new stream on the fly. So give a couple minutes and hope everyone can join us here and it'll all work out in the end. Anyway, third time's a charm. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let me get a couple seconds here. I had to do a little bit of dancing right behind the scenes here to get things going, but let me get my graphics package up and we'll take things from there. Where are we at here? H2R. Okay, and got the I want to copy the chat key over because I want to be able to post your comments into the stream as I go, so give me a second to update that. Okay, phew, all right, looks like we got it. Okay, so yes, and I'll give Brian pride of place here with heckling me here. Third time's the charm. There we go. Cool. All right, thanks everyone, guys. Thanks for hanging in there. So this is the ComicBase live stream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I'm the creator of ComicBase, and we'll be talking about all things comics and comic-related today. I have a couple of announcements about ComicBase, a couple things about Atomic Avenue, a couple news items about just life in general, and also about the comics industry. But what I really want to do is answer your questions. So if you have questions, please post them in the stream, in the comments on YouTube, and I will get to as many of those as I possibly can. And we'll take it from there. All right, so it's all right. So interesting. Greg is saying background music is in both channels, but my mic is on the left channel. I'm gonna have to look into this again. I'll look through the audio setup later on. Unfortunately, I say, guys, it's like this was a bit of a dance on the new thing right before stream time. So I hope the whole thing just holds together long enough for us to get the show on the road. But thanks for pointing that out, and I will look into it later on. We'll probably do a test stream at some point during the whole thing. Okay, so let's see here. Yes, Greg points out, thanks for, I hope I wasn't affected by the recent flooding in Nashville. I wasn't, except to say that there's now a lot more lakes in my neighborhood than there were beforehand. The way my property is shaped is it has a big cutout in the area between me and my neighbor, where it turns into a raging river when these things come down, and it flows down to a stream that it cuts across my backyard, then flows into a stream that's located on the other edge of my yard. And honestly, I'm gonna just give up trying to put dirt in there to make it so I don't kill myself when I try to mow that area. I used to sort of fill it in, thought, well, just a couple little holes, we'll get that going. And now we have like basically a whole stream bed cut into, so I'm just gonna have to put some rocks into it and make it pretty. Other than that, though, the Harpeth River, which is down here by Franklin, did indeed overflow pretty good, and there's some really awesome drone footage of downtown. Well, it's actually just outside of downtown Franklin, sitting there several feet deep in water, and there's a whole section just outside of the downtown where there's like some auto dealerships and things like that, and an old shoe store and stuff like that. They're just underwater. So that wasn't too pretty. That was what we did for fun last couple days. It still hasn't really subsided, and it actually was raining again today. So I think we're good. At least where I'm at. But yeah, I'm glad my property has got the angle it's got, and that I'm sitting about 10 feet higher than some other properties. I was oogling when I first moved in. It was like, oh, you have a lovely backyard. I just didn't know that it's now a duck pond. So that's a thing. It's what we do for fun. Other than that, let's see here. Just is not getting any sound. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Let me. All right. Geez, I don't know if this is even a thing I can. I think I looked into this last time. I went into. I'm going to give this about 30 seconds to see if I can route the sound in any different way than I'm routing it. And if I can't, then guys, we're just going to have to make do. So input settings, get my analog going on the one mic there. Output, analog 1 and 2, going to the monitor, into a stereo feed. So, yeah, don't know, guys. Let me have a look at the new switcher. There at any modern recording thing, there are so many ways to route audio and channels and the whole thing that it does get very involved very quickly, and it's a terrible thing to try to do live on the air. So I'm gonna have to say that we're just gonna have to tough it through this time. And if I'm only talking out of the left side of your ear, just I don't know, but I have nothing even clever to say about that. That doesn't sound just entirely insane. Okay, audio. So yeah, I'm looking at the whole thing. Does that's my levels, man. I don't know, man. It's I'm putting out a stereo signal on the mic. Is all I'm seeing here. I can swap you back and forth, but I can't make it any more centered than it already is. So I don't know about that, but I will look into it later on, and maybe I'll discover some fancy streaming setting that's playing into it. But anyway, for now we're just gonna have to roll with it. Okay, moving on. Okay, so, oh, just as I rebooted, I'm good. I don't freaking know, guys. Left channel sound. Don't know, man. Alright, moving on. I'm just gonna have to roll with it. Okay, other things that I want to talk about today, let me pull up my show notes. Okay, so first of all, if you do like what we're doing here at all with the show, and there's no reason to have liked what we did for the last 5 minutes, but do please like and subscribe if you haven't already. That does let YouTube know to put the announcement out to other folks and whatnot, and it does help us. We have picked up a number of subscribers over the weekend. I do appreciate that. I'd like to build it further, and I'll probably even start putting things out to the mailing list to let people know that the live stream exists again. I've been very quiet on the mailing list because I've been very heads down doing work on ComicBase, so I haven't done a lot of publicity lately, but I would like to get the word out. Other things are happening. So we already talked about the Franklin flooding. Today, my big news, finally got the freaking COVID shot. Everything's good. So in 3 weeks from now, my prison sentence is up. I will be off of house arrest and go out to live my life like a normal human being. Mask burning party to follow. I'm so over this stuff. Can you guys believe this has been a year that the whole world did this for a year? I remember a year ago we were sitting there going, man, we'll be nuts if this thing goes along more than a couple weeks, and we just did a year of this nonsense. I can't wait to see other human beings' faces again and see people smile and do normal human being things again. I mean, I love the heck out of live music. I can't wait to actually be seeing real bands again. So far, it's a big thrill for me when I see a busker on the street. So anyway, let's, I hope everyone else also, I'll put it this way. I hope you either get vaccinated if you are worried about that sort of thing. I hope if you're worried about catching it, please get vaccinated. You've got the ability to at this point. And honestly, if you're not worried about it, then you're not my problem anymore. Which is, so I wish everyone health and moving on. But my goodness, I want us all to get our lives back. So good luck with all that. And if you do have the ability to sign up and you've been waiting your turn, at least in Tennessee, the turn for everybody is now. I even got my daughter signed up for an appointment. She's one day after me, so the whole Bickford family should be good to go inside of about 3 weeks. So thank goodness this nonsense is over. All right, moving on. We've had a number of questions came in on the chat about how Windows 10 20H2. So if you guys don't know about this yet, let me switch over to that. I've got on another monitor here. Let's show it. Okay. All right, monitor 2. So Windows 20H2 is the second half release for the latest year of, you'd think it's 2021, but hey, so, who are we to say? But it's the most recent big release of Windows 10. It has a number of cool things going on with it. It updates a lot of the control panel structure and things like that to use the new setting structure. If you use dark mode, that's finally implemented properly across the whole board and so forth. It's worth looking at. And another thing people are asking about is they're not necessarily getting it automatically as part of Windows Update. If you're not getting it automatically, I put a link to this in the show notes, but do go over to this URL over in the Microsoft site, and you can download a thing called the Windows Update Assistant. Just go over here, click the Update Now button. It'll have you download a little program that'll download the software for you. Takes about an hour to do the full upgrade. It's pretty, pretty painless after that. But then you'll have the full current deal of Windows. There's nothing in ComicBase that requires this. It's just a really good thing to do. So I would definitely suggest, at some point do that. But do note also that your computers aren't necessarily going to do it automatically by themselves. So worth looking into. Like I say, it's come up, so I thought I would pass that on. All right, let me do a quick check of the chat here. Let's see. By the way, hail everyone who the old friends who come in here: Andre, Oro, Jeff, John, etc. Greg. So yeah, Greg says, "Welcome to the Vax Club, P." Yeah, it's there are a couple places I could have pulled rank on this thing, but I honestly I was determined to wait my turn, to the end. I went up with the what was it, the Pfizer one. I did not look out. Some people I know got the Johnson & Johnson, where it's a one and done. But you know what? I'll take it. It's this whole thing is a freaking miracle that this thing got developed as fast as it did, and I just let's. It's to me it's like getting to the end of the zombie movie where someone's actually developed a vaccine for the whole thing, and it's like, yeah, that's the thing that never happens. Let's get this sucker done with, so we can just, like I say, move on with our dang lives. Okay. Agent Camp says, watch show last night. I like the idea of a completed sets. Anything new on that? No, because I've been working on other things, man, but I appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny. Agent Camp also says a year wasted. It's funny. I really I gave some. I remember having a talk about 13 months ago with my guys where it was clear that this whole thing was coming down, and it was the tone of the staff call was basically like, all right, guys, people are going to be going nuts. We need to be extra cool as much as we can manage that, being a bunch of geeks who work on computers and read comic books all day. But it's like, you don't want to ramp everyone else's stress level up. You want to be like the calm voice of, that they talk to on the other end of the phone, where everything normal in their lives is going to hell. And I think, however we managed it, the people who are still around here managed to find some level of equilibrium or adjusting to their lives somehow. But this has not been a fun year for anyone. The other thing I was telling everyone was like, guys, and this is back when I thought this thing might go on for a month or two. It's like, if we come out of the end of this one and we haven't done stuff that we are proud of, we are going to feel like assholes. I mean, it's like, use the time and really dig in and let's really get some stuff done. I know you're distracted. I know it's really hard to kind of get your mojo working when the stuff is all there, but it's like, I really encourage, my folks at least to really, let's really deliver on what we're trying to do. And I'm actually really proud of my guys in terms of like, at some point I'll come up with the stats we did over the last year, but we just absolutely crushed it in terms of, major revs to every single thing we do. Actually, several major revs to everything we do, to the mobile app, to the site, we put out 2 or 3 different versions of the software during that time. Tens of thousands of corrections. I mean, it's just, yeah, and now Atomic Avenue is coming on the line. So we bunkered down. Honestly, what I'm looking forward to at the end of the whole thing is actually just getting back and doing something else. Playing some guitar, or getting out the drums, or just doing something fun. But yeah, it's. I'm going to have commentary on the year at large because I want to spend about 3 weeks to think about it. And it'll probably be the one time you see me have my thoughts on a teleprompter. It's probably going to be on a different channel as well, because I'm pretty sure YouTube will take all of 1 second to auto ban me for putting this out. Yeah, I'm honestly, I've got a rant, which I want to deliver on the whole thing, because man, there's a lot to rant about, but I want to make it good, and I want to make it focused, and I want to make it something where if you're not in the mood for a rant, you're not listening to it on part of the live stream. So that'll be a separate thing that comes out, but look for that the next 3 weeks or so, probably coinciding with when I burn my damn face mask. Yeah, no, we have, there's been a number of pukes who have not exactly covered themselves in glory during the course of this whole thing, but this has literally been one of the strangest events of my entire life in terms of things I've lived through on my 50-some years on the planet. I've never seen anything like this, and it was worldwide, and wow. Anyway, let's move on from that, though. Jeff, congrats to you, second vaccine this week, absolutely. Scott got first of 2, should be getting second in another week or so. Yeah, it's you know, there are some good things there, and it is interesting with like messenger RNA. I mean, one of the folks who did cover themselves in glory at this whole thing is the scientists and doctors who put this whole thing together. They are the absolute heroes of the hour on this whole thing. You know, and you know, let's hope that we've learned some new tricks in terms of vaccines and things like that. Which honestly, you know, people are throwing around talk about like, you know, is this the thing that cures cancer? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to find out about it. I think we've discovered we're really, really bad at epidemiology, but we're starting to get pretty damn good at genetic stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see where the science goes on this one. Side on a science level, on a social level, whew. Anyway, we'll talk later. All right, so let's see. Agent says potty mouth. Yeah, I'm sure I said something I didn't mean to. All right, so let's see here. Moving on. So other things going on. Marvel and Diamond are, well, I'm not going to say parting ways. It's not exactly true. Let me pull up the article on this one, and let me get you the news on that one. And let me see if I can do the cool thing where I put myself in picture-in-picture on the whole thing if I switch over. So if I kick over there and put on the keyer, do I wind up in the bottom? Yes, I do. Sweet. I'm starting to learn how to use this thing. Anyway, so the big news this last week, and honestly, I was so busy with other things I didn't give it proper attention, is that Marvel decided that they were going to pull away from Diamond for distribution of their comic books. Bounding into Comics has a good article on it. I've linked it in the show notes. The short version of it, I'll go ahead and quote it on this one. This is from Marvel's own blog, but they're announcing a new deal with Penguin Random House Penguin Random House Publisher Services, or if you guys ever start hearing the abbreviation PRHPS, that's going to be a thing now. But they're moving to have Penguin Random House distribute their both their. I expected it to say their graphic novels, but it turns out they're monthly comic books as well. Now, it's a strange one in that DC, as you guys remember, at the beginning of, I want to say May, pulled away from Diamond Comics and went to a couple of distributors, Lunar and UCS originally, to distribute their books, and then they had, oh god, was it Penguin, I believe, do their graphic novels. This was a really, really big deal. Now, the relationship with UCS, fell apart fairly quickly, and so Lunar is the only distributor of monthly DC comics in America right now. The graphic novels, I still believe, are going through Penguin, but Marvel pulling away from Diamond this is big news. A couple things. One is it's not entirely a divorce from Diamond. You're still allowed to buy your books if you're a Diamond account for a local comic store. You're still allowed to buy your books from Diamond. Realistically, though, they're now reduced to the status of a wholesaler, which means your discounts are not going to be what they were. So you're going to have every motive in the world other than maybe the convenience of your own inline order system, whatever you use to track your own store inventory and whatnot. If that interfaces with Diamond and the Diamond preview system, that might be a reason for you to stay for a while, but if inexorably, the logic of the bottom line is going to make you want to move, to a more direct relationship with the distributor, most likely. Another thing arguing against that, on the other hand, is if you guys have ever been inside of, say, a newsstand or a Barnes & Noble when they get the shipments of magazines in, and you look at the state that the magazines are in when they open up the box and how they get, whipped down the shelves and everything, and the kind of packing that goes into that, and compare and contrast that to the packing that goes into a box of comics that comes from Diamond, the distributors, it's night and damn day. Comics are fragile, monthly comic books especially, and even then, even with all the elaborate packaging that Diamond does to ensure things get there, there's still a decent amount of damages that happen. It's not infrequent for our guys to have to call up Diamond and say, hey, we have the following books that are damaged, we need credit on those and so forth. Don't expect that to be a thing, or I'll put it this way, if it becomes a thing for Penguin Random House, that's going to be a new thing for them. They're not used to that. But anyway, they did make the deal to take on the relationship with Marvel. Marvel has well, let me talk about winners and losers on this one a little bit. So the big loser obviously is Diamond. Diamond, we saw this movie before a little bit back in the 90s when Marvel decided we're going to take our toys and go. We bought Heroes World Distribution, and we're going to go and take our, Marvel is what 40% of the direct market. We're going to take our toys and we'll self-distribute, which then leaves Diamond with it leaves them with all their warehouses, all their truck fleets, everything that they do, all the fixed costs that they have built into their business model, and 40% of their revenue just walked out the door. They, of course, scrambled. They did what anyone would do. And they did everything they could to secure exclusive rights with anyone who would go exclusive with them. They wound up with DC, and that kept them alive. But in return, back in the first time we saw this movie, Capital City Distribution, which I also have very fond memories of, they were a really good distributor. They, having lost Marvel and DC at that point, folded their doors. They had to close up shop, and everyone else then was begging for an account with the one distributor who's left in America, which was Diamond. Diamond, I'm going to say, look, nobody likes there being one choice for anything. That said, I don't know that Diamond wanted this role of being like the one comic distributor in America of any size or stature. I mean, yes, I know there's little kind of independent-y, you can get a few comic books from them, types of services, or here and then. But as far as being the guy that basically, if you want to distribute comic books in America, you kind of got to go through Diamond. I don't think Diamond originally wanted that role. I don't know if they've relished it in any way. And to my, thinking, they haven't really abused it, or at least not that I have any direct knowledge of. Diamond could have been such a bastard, dealing with that. And it seems like they've really saw themselves as the caretaker of the comics industry. Steve Geppi is a guy who loves comics. I had a meeting in his office once. We were in negotiations. Way back in the early days of ComicBase, I was making a play to license the Overstreet comic book price guide back when they had they were the one price guide in town worth that was they were the brand to beat, and back when the Overstreet price guide had with its 100,000 or so listings represented all the listings that you'd have in the world. Now obviously we're different days these days, but back then it would have been a great thing to have done the deal on. We never did manage to get the deal, but I'll never forget walking through Steve Geppi's, he was just building the Diamond galleries at that point. They're still putting up the stuff on the walls. He's kind of showing off, where the museum was going to be leading into where his office was. And in order to put my laptop down, he had to clear off some Golden Age comics from his desk. I remember him sticking a Superman 8, just like kind of taking it off the desk and plopping it into a box of comics that were just at the side of his desk. I'm like, wow. That's pretty cool. Anyway, Steve Geppi's a guy who loves comics, and he's really tried, I think, to do well by the industry. Now, that said, do people have beefs with Diamond? Absolutely. Do people accuse them of not changing with the times? Absolutely. I mean, and I'm not going to say any of those criticisms are unfair. Everyone knows their business better than anyone else knows their business. So if a comics retailer has a problem with Diamond, I have no doubt their beefs are legit. But I also know at least something about Diamond in that they're full of good folks who work real hard, and they also gave a crap. I mean, they care about keeping the whole thing running. To the extent where they actually did a bunch of things that didn't make them as much money, but gave little, small distributors, small publishers a chance. The number of books that you had to, sell to get into the Diamond catalog was always artificially small. And they resisted a lot of pressure from some of the bigger dogs in the industry to shut down small retailers and small publishers. So, I mean, I want to give them some props. I mean, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that never really gets talked about, where Diamond really acted very decently, and I want to, as someone who saw some of that firsthand, I want to give them some props for that, because they didn't need to, right? They could have just said, hey, we'll deal with the big guys, and if you're not a big guy, screw you. We're just here to get the last dime out of everyone we can do. Anyway, that said, Diamond is going to really take it in the neck on this one. I don't know what they do. You've just looked at the situation that Capital City Comics faced back in the end of the 90s, 2000-ish era, with Heroes World, where 70% of their revenue just walked out the door on them. Now, not all the Marvel accounts will leave right away, but man, the pressure is on. And I don't know what you do to keep a comic distribution business, which is largely a fixed cost business. I don't know how you keep that running with this kind of earthquake in the foundations of your business. Maybe they've got some moves. I'm going to be watching closely, and I am going to reach out to some of the folks who are closer into the whole thing. I think in a couple 3 weeks I'm going to see if I can arrange a StreamYard call between myself and some of the other folks that work more the industry side of the comics business, and see if we can get a live discussion going on the whole thing. I think that'd be really interesting. But I think we're in for some real changes in the comics industry. Now, does it mean you can't get the latest issue of Captain America as a regular comic consumer? No, absolutely not. I mean, that's going to stay where it is. But there were some rumors chasing around at the beginning of last year, or beginning of this year, end of last year, saying things like, well, there's a rumor that DC is going to switch to either abandoning comics altogether or switching to like $7.99 as their baseline format as opposed to the 32-page floppies. Is that in keeping with being distributed almost exclusively through book-style publishers? If you saw Marvel do something like that, would that be something you would expect? Oh yeah, it really is. There's a reason that manga, distributes very well. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think you could have a couple of very good prop bets going on as to whether the comic book of 2 years from now starts at $8 and has a much thicker cover than it used to. There could be a number of things like that going on. So I mean, like, we're gonna have changes in our business. I think it's always been the case, and we always like it when things don't change, but I think we will be not at all surprised when things are really, really different. And look, maybe it's healthy, maybe it's not. One of the beefs that people had back in the day, I remember Maggie Thompson saying this, and it kind of shocked me back in the early 90s. She said, the problem with comics is they don't cost enough. And I was like, Maggie, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, comics are up like $2 now. They're like, you know what we spend on comics every month? And she said, well, no. It's like the deal is from a news standpoint of view, the reason they're losing newsstand distribution is because they don't earn enough per square inch of available floor space for what they are. And along with being relatively cheap and for what they are, you can't move enough revenue pushing a certain bulk of comics out of the whole thing. And so I could see any number of reasons that the average comic book, that the floppy comic book might possibly become a thing of the past, which is that the end of the world? I mean, I don't know. It's certainly it's the end of an era, and I'm gonna miss floppy comic books. So it's my whole life. I mean, what am I gonna do with myself? I'm not bagging and boarding everything. Jesus Christ! But at the same time, it's things do change. Things are not always as they were. We've seen, in my lifetime, I've seen the paper sizes, factors change. I've seen it go from, cheaply printed newsprint to beautifully colored and illustrated stuff. I've seen the rise of graphic novels. I remember the first time anyone used the term graphic novel, people looked at them like, graphic novel? What are you talking about? It's a funny book, man. It's just got covers on it. But now it's like, if you look at how things are actually distributed out in the real world, the graphic novel is not only do people know what it means, but it's the standard way most people encounter comic books. It's us hardcore guys that even view them as we call floppies now. So don't know. Really don't. And then digital distribution is the other wrinkle on that one. I do think it's a fair bet that Marvel and DC will be self-distributing all their digital content with much more abandon than they have before. One of the concerns that Marvel and DC there was always a lot of pushback from the distribution channel, and that means Diamond, that they not get out ahead of the comic stores in terms of their digital distribution. So are we going to see a lot more day-and-date distribution of digital media? Or for that matter, are we going to see digital media that's even ahead of its print media? I think it's a decent bet. Don't have a crystal ball, but that one seems pretty plausible to me. Let me do a quick check of the chat here, because I've seen a lot of comments flying in here. Let's see here. Wow, I gotta scroll. Give me a moment here. Okay. First of all, John C says the COVID shot roll up in Canada is really slow. Yeah, it's funny. Different. I know. Getting back to COVID for a second. I'm watching the different countries because it's fascinating to me. Is a year ago, none of us knew anything. We all had different ideas of what's the best course of how to deal with this thing and whatnot. And it occurred to me, oh my God, we're actually building a worldwide data set where some people are trying different things than other people, and it's going to be interesting to see, from county to county, state to state, country to country, as people try different things, what works out better and worse. One of the things that's very frustrating to me about COVID is that as we started having lots and lots and lots of data that wasn't just propaganda from the Ministry of Truth, it was like actual, people reporting actual things, where you had a good basis for believing that this is actually they're doing their best job of reporting what they see, at least according to whatever the standard was that they're being told to report on. That nobody at that point, right around that point, everyone got very committed to a certain point of view of the best way to deal with it, and everyone became just immune to changing their mind based on how the data was shaping up, based on whether it was fitting what their projection was or not. Anyway, save that one for the ramp. But the thing I'm going to say though is, one thing that's interesting is when the vaccines became available, and different countries approved them different times, but it was all pretty close to each other out in the West. The UK, Canada, and America all took slightly different approaches to how do we vaccinate people at different times. Some people, took a longer approval process, a little slower on the ramp up. UK did something really interesting where we have a 2-shot vaccine, which is kind of unusual, where you're not fully vaccinated until you got the second one. So, I guess you get most of the benefit with the first one, but, you're not really hitting the numbers they want to hit until you get the second one. It's kind of like your close-in booster shot. But anyway, the UK said, look, for the first bunch of time, we're going to be really short on vaccines, so let's stick as many, first doses in arms as we possibly can, and we'll be just ramping down our risk factor on a broad scale, as opposed to finishing the job and making sure, people, can sign up for complete courses at once. That's more the tack that the U.S. took. And it drove me crazy because when it finally became possible for me to sign up for the vaccine, I probably was 24 times that I managed to get onto the thing where it's like, okay, I've locked in my first appointment. Then you go say, and go, and it requires you to lock the second appointment. And then by the time, and you're doing that and you're getting very fast, doing this whole thing. Your reservation expires in 15 minutes. It's like Ticketmaster. You're watching the thing go, count down on you. But by the time you click on the whole thing, it says, oh, so sorry. I just lied to you and I just took away your first appointment, even though it was like, wait, I had 12 minutes left. I did this probably 24 times before I managed to lock 2 in once, where I could actually sign up for anything because it wouldn't let me complete the sign up for both. In the meantime, of course, you've got, the whole world's trying to sign up for all these things. So, the times are flying out the door as fast as you could possibly believe. Anyway, it's interesting to see how it goes. I do hope, it's all going to end quicker than we think. Because one thing I'm noticing is that the regimes around, the various, rituals we get into with COVID, they're all falling away right now. Because if people went through all this nonsense, they said, look, the reason I did it is because I want my life back. And as you get a reasonable portion of people who've already paid their dues and did that one, suddenly the social consensus that mandates that everyone do exactly the same rituals in order to get through life, there's no reason for it for an ever-increasing portion of the populace. And so they're falling away, and you can see it on a day-by-day basis. It went from a time when you'd walk, you'd see people, if someone walked into a store without a mask on, and you'd have 20 people mobbing them and screaming them. I remember those videos from the height of this whole thing, to the point where you see a guy without a mask and you're like, yeah, guess he got his shots early, and no one hassles him. And the more you see a certain behavior, the more everyone models it. And the dirty secret of a lot of this stuff is we're not really guided by the science or anything else like that. We're guided by what our most reasonable friend is doing. And so we're looking at what our most reasonable friend is doing. If our most reasonable friend starts doing something different, we're like, oh, well, maybe I should do that too. And you can see people just very, very quickly, things are changing up. Anyway, moving back. Cluster. Good grief. Or I don't even understand what you're saying here. Clustered, regularly interspersed short palindromic repeats. All right, man. Okay, so, all right, and now I guess we're just making up acronyms here. You guys have to look at the chats. I can't read all these. Age Scamp says, everyone says Jeppy's a great guy. Yes, I mean, look, don't get me wrong, we're not like close personal friends or anything, but I respect the hell out of the guy. I mean, he just, you know, it's, you know, I think he's a tough guy to do business with. I mean, I think had we didn't actually, you know, we tried, but we didn't manage to close a deal. But I mean, I think you just, I think he's a guy who really cares about the things he works with, and he wants them to continue. He's not whatever people's stereotype of a nasty businessman is. He's not that guy. I mean, he loves baseball, so when he finally had money from running a comic thing, he ran in, became a part owner of the Baltimore Orioles. And the very first thing he did is he took all the comic retailers out when they came to his convention. He said, "Hey guys, I got seats for us all here, and here's a Marvel jersey, and let's all go to the ball game." And he was just cool. He was having fun with, you know, showing off the things he loves. So, and everything I've seen about the guy tells me that's the guy he is. I've never seen anything that tells me that he's, you know, I think he's a tough guy. I don't think he's a cream puff at all, but I think he's also a fair guy. So, anyway, all right, let's see here. More about the challenge, guys. I can't do anything about this, but I will look into it later. All right. Let's see here. And Confident Man, yes, Marvel is cutting out Diamond, not entirely, but yeah, they are pulling their business into a different thing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about. So we talk about Diamond as a loser. Going for that's, you know, if you guys know Thomas Sowell at all, he'd refer to that as a stage 1 analysis, right? So stage 2 analysis is, well, what else is on the whole, you know, who else is affected by this one? What are you know, once you kick over the one domino, what's the next dominoes to fall? And that's always what makes economics interesting to try to analyze. Well, some things that maybe aren't the first guy against the wall, but suddenly you see all the motives swing in a way that these guys may not like. If I were Lunar, I'd be very concerned right now. Lunar right now is an exclusive deal with DC. But DC's motivations just changed in a big way because Random House, Penguin's motivations just changed in a big way. They've already locked down one distributor. If you are distributing to all the same channels already, it turns out that shipping another guy's books in the same package is only marginally more expensive. You know, as compared to having an entirely different account in an entirely different set of boxes to ship someplace. If I'm simply packing, my Marvel books in with my Harvey books in, with my Archie books in, with my whatever else books, and I'm shipping them to the same Barnes & Noble or the same comic shop, that's no big deal for me once I've taken on the whole thing. So, Marvel is now in a position where they've given all their business to Random House. Random House is now saying, "Hey, I gotta now do all this stuff to make Marvel happy." Marvel probably got to make this deal. Like, why would Random House make a deal to ship Marvel's floppies? Is an interesting question. For instance, like, I get why Random House would want to distribute Marvel's graphic novels, and I think what it really comes down to is Marvel, which by the way is a subsidiary of Disney, is in a position of saying, "Look, guys, you want to be our buddy? Because if you're not our guys, if you don't distribute everything we want you to distribute, then we're in a position to say that all of our stuff goes to somebody else." So think about everything when you walk into a Barnes & Noble. Think about everything that has a Disney logo on it, a Spider-Man logo on it. I mean, we're talking about everything from the games to the plush toys to the whatever else. Marvel is in a position to make that go to a different distributor. So if you're Random House, are you going to try to keep them happy even if you got to go nuts trying to distribute a bunch of, you know, easily fractured comic books? Yeah, you're gonna try. And honestly, any other distributor would move heaven and earth to make that happen as well. Now, does that mean that they like distributing the floppy end of things? Maybe not so much. You know, think about what a pain in the butt it was for Diamond to, you know, distribute all that and deal with returns on, hey, you know, I have a slightly blunted lower right-hand corner in my copy of Iron Man 483. I mean, that's not a thing that happens with conventional books. I mean, it's, you know, usually if conventional book gets a slightly, you know, a paperback gets a slightly blunted lower corner, which by the way is harder to do. Usually people do, stick that up on the shelf, and if you happen to have bought the one from, that has the not busted corner on it, someone will just buy the one with the busted corner on it later on, because there isn't that kind of condition frenzy that comics have. Or for that matter, magazines never really developed that kind of condition frenzy. Now, look, if it's ripped in half, that's a problem. But it's a whole different world keeping your comics in good nick, getting them to the shops, and that's a lot of hassle for distributors. A lot of returning, a lot of things that they don't really enjoy doing so much. But Marvel and DC, because when you're talking about Marvel, you're talking about Disney, you're talking about that entire empire. When you're talking about DC, you're talking about the entire Warner Media empire. Both of these guys are very, very big dogs, and they are in a position to absolutely dictate terms. But if both of those guys now have gone to someone else, so if Random House Publishing is or Penguin is publishing both of those guys, and you're Lunar, what's in it for DC? I mean, why would DC bother staying with Lunar? It's an open question. I really wonder what the answer is on that one, other than they signed a deal for at least a year, probably. What happens at the end of that year? Are we going to hear some news? I don't know. I'm not privy to any contracts of any of this stuff right now. But typically when you're signing deals like this, you have nice round numbers of months or years involved. And it was about a year ago that they would have inked their deal with Lunar. So yeah, expect some more news in the future. I think there's going to be a number of pennies that drop on this one. Okay, and Maggie's the best, absolutely. Yeah, so it's interesting. Agent Camp said comics could be cheaper if they stop the house ads and start getting better outside advertisers. Absolutely. At some point, I'm going to dig up an article I wrote for a magazine over in England called I think it was called the 77% solution, or the 77-cent solution. But I basically had taken two comics I was filing at the time. One was like the latest issue of some Wildstorm comic, and the other one was the latest issue of like a Star Spangled War stories. And I just sat there and I opened them up and I counted story and ad pages, and compared the two. And it came down to the modern comic book, if you divorce the house ads, is so devoid of paid advertisement, it's frightening. And what it really comes down to is comics cost so much, not because of the increase in the page rates, not because of the increase in production values, all that stuff. No, it's largely they cost so much because they're not having other people pay for their production. And if you if you kept the same number of ad pages that were paid for by outside people. So a house ad is when Marvel's advertising something for Marvel, which, technically you carry it on your books as if, Department X had paid you the money. In reality, though, it's like, no, if you don't have an outside company paying you the money, it's a revenue loss, or it's a revenue shift. It's not revenue to you when you collect on that ad from, the games publishing division. Now, if Games Workshop pays for an ad, then suddenly you get a big check in the door, and that helps pay for the print run. But at the time, and I want to say this was in the 90s, I want to say I was looking at a comic book that cost like $2, and it came down to that if you just took the rate of inflation, and if you kept the number of ad pages consistent between the 1970-something Star Spangled War story that I was looking at, that the modern comic book, instead of being $2 would, or $2.50 or whatever it was, would have been costing like 78 cents. Yeah, so I mean, what changed really is that the house, you lost the ability to sell anything less than a partial page, than a full page ad. If you ever look at old comic books, one thing that's really awesome about them is all these little, 30-second page ads or quarter page ads. Marvel didn't, when we looked into advertising with Marvel in the 90s at one point, they wouldn't even sell us anything less than a full page, and the full page ad rate was like $40,000 to go over part of their line, because you could say, well, do you want to be over the kids line, the adult line, or everything? And it basically was like, if we want to be in one issue of, when you advertise, you get in their whole line at once. You don't advertise in Iron Man, you got to advertise in all their books. But it would have been like, we'd write up them a check for $40,000. And when you see people advertise of things like that, it's funny because I've seen other people who I know didn't have the $40,000, and the only thing I can think of is, yeah, and that's why they only advertised with these guys the one time, because they probably stiffed them on it. And then you see them pop up in different publications. I'm not naming names. Anyway, moving on. Okay, let's see here. Heidi McDonald implied on the One More Time podcast, if Diamond hadn't shut down, then DC might not have felt compelled to jump ship. It's possible. Again, we're looking at a year ago, almost, a year ago next month is when the lockdowns came, and you just simply couldn't ship product. It got a lot of people to make decisions that they hadn't necessarily wanted to make. But they, if you want to keep your business running, you made some adjustments. So yeah, it's interesting to do. Greg says, outside advertisers, it's tough to get without higher circulation numbers. I'm going to agree and not agree with that a little bit. If I'm an advertiser, I don't really care so much whether you have a lot of circulation as to whether you have the right circulation. It's all about targeting, and that's why it's funny, because when we are taking up ads for our own stuff, like if I'm talking to like if the demographic for someone who likes ComicBase, right, is basically a hardcore comic collector, we'd say it's people with enough comic books to have a problem. Because there's a lot of people who like comic books who will read an issue of Spider-Man, but until you get to a certain magic number where you're like, oh man, I gotta do something about these, you're never gonna spend 1 cent on comic software. So I mean, we can't reach you at any level. It's why ComicBase Free exists. It's because we figured out, look, until you got 500 comic books in your collection, we may as well just give it to you as a demo, because you're never going to buy it from us. It's never going to happen. So if we get you hooked on it as a demo, then maybe when that 501st issue comes in, maybe you sit there and say, hey, it's worth popping for the $50 or $60 to get the Express edition or whatever else. But I mean, there's a certain level where like we can't reach you at all. And if you look at the bell curve of where comic readers are, the vast majority of comic readers are those guys who are gonna, they're gonna read some comic books. They've got, a pile of them somewhere in their house, but they're never gonna become like what we are. They're never gonna become like the comic collectors who have, again, that's that part where you started collecting when you were a kid, and you wake up when you're 35 and you say, oh, honey, I got to do something about this. And at that point, that's when you call us. But if we had a way of reaching comic collectors, you pay whatever you got to do to reach those guys. Strangely enough, advertising in a comic book, maybe not the best way for us to do that. So, if I got to talk to 100 people to reach 2 people who might be interested, just in an issue of Spider-Man, who might be interested in reading about ComicBase, I'm not going to pay that much. I mean, you can, this way, you better be able to reach just millions of folks for me to reach the people I need to reach, and then I'm going to price my ad rate accordingly, because I'm looking at my customer, they call it the customer acquisition cost, right? What's a new customer worth to me? And I'm going to try to say, well, if I blow this money on this ad, what's my revenue about that? What's my revenue over the long term if they renew every year and thing like that? And I'm going to say, does this ad make any kind of sense? Now, I can either do that by advertising it to 2 million people and hitting some number that makes sense, or if I could advertise it to 2,000 people, but 20% of those guys care, the 2,000 people, those are going to be my guys every time. It's one of the reasons I always used to love Comics Buyer's Guide, because not only did they see comics, the market very similarly to the way we did, and we got along just because we kind of sensibilities about things, but also they were advertising directly to people with enough comics to have a problem. So they were our guys. Strangely enough, we never did an ad in Wizard, because the Wizard demographic was actually quite a bit different than the Comics Buyer's Guide demographic. That said, we also, the worst performing ad of our entire career of print advertising was the ad we placed in the Comics Journal. Sorry, I think we tracked like, anyway, it's such a low conversion rate. It was stunning. Whoever the Comics Journal reader was, whatever that ad was that we did at the time, man, that was not a fit. But anyway, that's just a thing. Asian Camp says, be better if the books were cheaper and got rid of the SJW agenda. Yeah, no, I mean, cheaper is better, and the SJW thing is not helping. It's SJW, if you guys aren't caring, it's the social justice warrior thing. It's there's a lot of racial and gender and whatever else tokenism going on in comics right now, which honestly I think is very exciting to people who are involved in the publishing world. I think it makes them feel like they're really doing something about some thing that they consider to be a big problem in the world, and they're really fighting a power for the good fight. And I just don't know if people who read comic books because they like comic books are super interested. Because I read some of these stories and I'm like, yeah, this was if it wasn't actively insulting me, for, I'm a white dude, I mean, you're born the way you're born, right? But if it wasn't just actively insulting me for being, just a dude or being a white guy, it was just leaden storytelling. It certainly wasn't engaging my interest. And I have a thing where I try not to give money to people who just actively indicate they despise me. But it's just, we all know the demographics of the comic industry. Yeah, it's heavily guys. Would we like to see more girls? Absolutely. I've never been to either an engineer party or a comic party where the guys weren't like all over us, like being welcoming to any girls who happen to show up. I mean, we love it when the girls come and play with us. It's the best time ever. But certain things appeal differently to different things. I mean, you tickle different, you scratch different itches for people. You tickle different parts of their brain. But yeah, I mean, who wants to be in a part of the world where people are actively attacking the people who are your readers? And it's strange, but it seems to be something that's becoming a bit of a fetish in some of the publishers right now. Honestly, it's insanity. If you have any care for your own bottom line, if you are editing any title at Marvel, DC, or anywhere else, and you sit there and say, am I just actively pissing on my readers? Stop it. Because I don't care what if you think you're making a worthy striking at this point, you're killing your customers, and yeah, they're gonna walk away. All right, let's see, what happens when a hot character's first appearance is technically in the digital version because of an earlier street date? Great question. So what's going to happen in ComicBase, I can tell you that much, is we are starting to track digital-only comic books. They come in as there's a variant that got added somewhere in the ComicBase 20 series. It got added as digital. I think it's like Dig or something like that if you see the abbreviation. But it is possible to enter a comic book now that exists only in digital form. Now, to the extent that a comic, it's frequently these days you'll see a comic book that's published in both print and digital form. If the first appearance just happens to be in the version that hit the street through digital distribution first, honestly, I don't care. If anyone wants to make a principled argument that the quote-unquote street date of the comic book is now, because we treat any comic book that was published both in digital and in print format, we treat it as one item. Because you can attach the digital media to the comic book. They're not separate from each other. One didn't exist without the other. If you want to say that the street date of the whole thing was when the digital one came out, I think that's a fair argument to make, and I would certainly, consider, accepting that correction or taking that in, because I think that's fair. And if it becomes really interesting, I mean, if something really radical happens with street dates, like say if the digital street dates get a month ahead of anything else, then I think we might need to have a real talk about multiple release dates or something if that becomes of interest. But yeah, I think the first appearance of the character from a historical point of view in terms of comics, I think that happens with the particular issue of the comic book. So when I'm writing an issue of Spider-Man, I'm writing a particular story with a particular set of art, which then introduces a particular set of characters. And that is one piece, regardless of whether I printed that in a large format, a small format, a digital format, or whatever else. It's one item, even though you might distribute it in different media at different times. Okay, lots of discussion about that. Man, I'm gonna have to move on. Diamond's a paragon of virtue compared to Ticketmaster. Yeah, I'll sign up. Yeah. Let's see. If Marvel pulls enough from ComicBase if Marvel pulls enough from Diamond, isn't that the end of Diamond over your play of Heroes World? I think that's a really distinct possibility. And like I say, if so, I'm sorry, we were talking about winners and losers. I mentioned Lunar, another one that is potentially the loser I worry about, because I mean, look, I think the loser's not going to be the comic consumer necessarily, unless you're just really, if you're really devoted to the floppy format, you might be a loser on this one, because I think the floppy format might go away. I care that Diamond, is going to take it the neck on this one, because I think Diamond has been stand-up guys, and I like seeing stand-up guys survive and thrive. Look, they get a lot of, they get a lot of moxie, and if maybe they become the premier distributor of something else, maybe they do, they've, that they've been thinking about how do we alter our business to stay alive through this whole thing. They do distribute toys, they do distribute cars, they do other things like that. Maybe there's some other move they can do that I'm not looking at, because I don't obsess about their business like I hope they obsess about their business. So it's always dangerous to straight line anything. But one thing I do worry about quite a bit is I worry about the ability for small publishers to get into print. So in other words, if I'm Treehouse Comics, right? The legendary comic, thing in the Captain Underpants series. It's it's a couple kids. I got an idea for a comic book. You got an idea for a comic book. Let's go in and we start photocopying it, and distributing it at conventions originally, but then we publish our real comic book, and we get There was a time, and I think it's still going on right now, where you could sell 500 copies of that or 1,500 copies of that and get that into a distribution where a guy in England could buy your comic book in print format. And at that moment, you were on the same shelf in the same place that the latest issue of Spider-Man was. I mean, this is like a level of status that you could walk into, where if you had a good enough product, you could be the Walking Dead. You could, like, I got an idea for a new kind of zombie book, and you could get the kind of profile that lets you set the world on fire. We've seen any number of other things come along that way. Hellboy eventually got there. It took a lot of time, but it got there. Invincible, I mean, take any indie hit you ever hit. They had a chance to get read by all the same guys who read Spider-Man, who read Superman, whatever else. I think if you distribute purely digitally, I think it's just harder. It's harder to find an audience that is going to see your stuff organically. I mean, you can certainly take out ads if you got any money. You can try to get covered in whatever kind of podcasts or social media or allowing you to do things, and a lot of cool stuff will bubble up. Honestly, I'm seeing a lot of neat stuff coming from Indiegogo and Kickstarter, where I'm sitting there thinking, God, maybe that's where my comic spend should start going, because I'm seeing a lot more stuff that's just interesting to me on a personal level coming out of these areas that I haven't seen in the same format in the comic world since the 90s. And so maybe that's me as a grown-up, maybe that's where my collection increasingly moves toward. But I do think it's something really awesome for a comic creator to, you get an opportunity in comics right now where, people who make films for a living dream of being able to take your wild idea and for next to no money, just a lot of time and dedication, have the same shot at getting a distribution deal that you'd get if you won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and in Sundance and everything else. It's you can get there in comic books so much faster than you can get there making any other kind of media. And I think those guys are going to find that it's a harder world out there. Now, the good news is there's going to be no gatekeepers if that happens. But I very much wonder if there's going to be another distributor that has the same kind of openness to small creators that Diamond did. And if there isn't, I'm gonna miss that a lot. Okay, and wow, and Greg, I appreciate this. You're breaking up your things into multiple points here. This is like a Twitter thread. One of two. Eddie McDowell reports that PRH has been looking at periodical comic distribution for a long time. I don't doubt it. I feel like there's a lot of mechanical difficulties with it, especially around damages and shipping. And she says the reason is a couple thousand guaranteed clients will take a product on a non-returnable basis. Yeah, they'll take it non-returnable, which is great. That was the original deal of the comics direct market. Is they'd sell it to 7-Eleven, but 7-Eleven would get like a 20% discount rate. So if it sells, well, make the numbers round. If it sells for 50 cents, yeah, made it round, so I've used 50 cents. They would buy it at 40 cents. They'd pocket a cool dime if they sold the thing. But that was the end of it. But at the end of the month or 2 months, whenever the things were getting thrashed out, they could send them back to the whole thing. They still kept their dime for having sold that copy of Spider-Man, but they were never going to be wanting to devote a lot of space to the comics rack. You see how compact a comics rack is. It's there for a reason, because right next to the comics rack was the thing with all the Slim Jims in it and all the candy bars, and you can know which one of those two things earned more money for the distributor. Difference is they didn't get to send the Slim Jims and the candy bars back, and so they bought them at a higher discount and they sold for more money. Now, when the direct market came out, the deal was, hey, I'll sell you that same comic book for 25 cents. You know, so when you sell it, you pocketed 25 cents off it, 2.5 times your profit. Amazing. But at the end of the month, you can't send it back to me. And so that was a pretty interesting deal. 7-Eleven didn't have a lot of interest in that one, but comic stores suddenly grew up out of nowhere and said, like, hey, we'll take that deal all day long. And by the way, you're saying we get a reliable distribution of these guys from people who are specializing in always providing my type of product every month, not just kind of on a catch-as-can-catch basis. So that was a great deal. That's where we got the modern comic store. But yeah, it's a different deal for publishing. Okay. Different estimates on comic stores. 17 to 1800. How many comic book stores are left? Definitely below 2,000. Man, I gotta say my own estimate is much lower than that. Okay. Oh, and I did something good. Thank you, Pete. Awesome. Classified ads. Let's see. ROI. Man, I've gotten so far behind the talks on the whole thing that I'm losing track of what I was saying there. Andre said, I saw your ad in the preview magazine for version 3. It's why I got ComicBase and learned that it was existing. Oh, sweet. I'm so glad that ad ended. And by the way, also, if you guys are interested in like old style ads we ever once did, we actually did advertise in the Dark Horse that had... I want to say it was Buffy #1 has an ad for ComicBase on the I think the back cover of it. So if you ever had the Dark Horse, but that was actually a really good month for Dark Horse. We kind of knocked out of the park on that one. I want to say it was ComicBase 4. As long as they pay pre-COVID estimates, something like 25% of stores were on back debt and something like that for a decade or two. Yeah, it's so another thing that happens. I think what you're alluding to, Competent Man, is you get into a situation when you've got a regular supplier for anything, where you're living on 30 or 60-day credit with them, and what you're really doing is, they ship you a whole bunch of product. You're hoping to ship sell the stuff, and at a certain point, if you're not really good with your cash flow, if you're not well capitalized as a business, you're using the money you spent to buy the product, to sell the original product, to pay for the product in the first place. And if things slow up for you, things take a bad turn, if people manage to sell you too much product that you can't move very quickly, the bill comes where you really do need to pay for that comic shipment or that wood pulp shipment or whatever it is you buy, whatever your raw materials or your business are. You really do need to pay for that, or they will not ship you anymore. And Diamond, at a certain point, was carrying a lot of comic stores. I don't know what their bottom line looks like in a while, but it was one of those things where, like, they definitely wanted to keep people in business if they thought that it was like a short-term problem they'd get over. But at a certain point, they'd say, yeah, look, no mas, you need to pay us, or we're cutting you back to cash terms, or we cut down how long you're allowed to float the loan with us, and so forth. And then when you see those businesses go under, they tend to go under really fast and really hard, because as soon as you can't float the cash, you're basically making your own distributor float the cash to you. Not only do you close up all your stores all at once, but the other thing you'll find out is if you're a big enough chain doing that stuff, or if the distributor has enough stores like that on their rolls where they default on them, then suddenly the distributor is in a lot of trouble, because they also have to pay for stuff. In addition to that, the distributors tend to have very, very high fixed expenses, because no one's floating them the rent on their truck fleets, or their or their electricity bill, or whatever it is that they're doing, with their warehouses and so forth. That's all fixed capital cost. So yeah, so when you see industries contract like that, it's usually stunning how quickly the contractions happen, and it's it snowballs back to the person who even supplied you. There's an old saying in banking where if you owe the bank $1,000, you've got a problem. If you owe the bank $100,000 or $1 million, the bank has a problem, because if you default, suddenly the bank is in trouble where they might default. If you guys remember the credit crunch of 2008 or so, we definitely got to a point where, like, the bank and even the federal government started having a problem, because when all these loans failed all at once, it wasn't just like Joe Schmo losing his overextended home loan. Suddenly it was like major financial corporations would go under because so many people were defaulting all at once. Okay. Lance, we're gonna have to start seeing blockchain for digital comic collecting. Guys, do not doubt this at all. At some point, I'm gonna have to do a thing on was it fun FRF? I think it's FRF. It's fun fungible something tokens of FRTs. But basically it's a blockchain token which guarantees that this is the first of whatever the thing is as a digital good. And somebody sold one of these ones, and in a way they're nothing. It's in a way it's a large hexadecimal number, but it's the one thing that proves that I have the one original digital copy, if you can imagine that. Someone sold, like I think Jack Dorsey's the head of Twitter, sold one of these tokens which gave you the right to say I own, or at least I have the one original copy of the first tweet on the system, which is something like, is this Jack, is this thing on? It was something stupid like that, and it sold for just some stupid amount of money. You will absolutely see things like this for digital goods. It's a one-of-a-kind thing for something that has no physical existence. Go figure, man. All right. Yeah, we're gonna have to have a blockchain thing at some point. By the way, it turns out if we also were going back in time, one of my favorite fantasies ever as a human being is that I could go back in time to like 1938 with like a buck in my pocket and just go to the newsstand when like Action Comics 1's coming out and just buy all the beautiful mint copies that are coming out of the boxes, take it back in my time machine and somehow certify them as, yes, I kept them in an airtight capsule for 80 years. That's why they're in such perfect shape. And that's why I would have the tens and tens of millions of dollars that'd be worth. No, the equivalent of that in modern life is if we'd gone back at the start of this COVID nonsense, and if we'd all bought Bitcoin, we would be up like almost 10x on our money right now, which I gotta say is just the idea that any store of value has that kind of volatility built into it scares the bejesus out of me. But maybe if you guys are braver than I am, and you can talk about your Bitcoin things at some point, that'd be really interesting to have like a fungible Bitcoin tokeny investment show at some point. It is absolutely nuts. All right, like LCS, yeah, it's Agent Camp says my local comic store seems to survive on magic cards. I don't doubt it. Honestly, like I say, I'm looking forward to about 3 weeks of actually going into my local comic store and seeing what they look like, because I haven't been in there in a year. They were always I'm not gonna name their names, but they weren't exactly my cup of tea. There was one that was a little better, it was a little further away from me. But stores of different crowds that appeal to them, whatever. But these guys weren't, they're my local guys, so you gotta be, at least a little loyal to the local team. But it's like, this one's you vibe with and don't. I just hope they're still there. I don't know. I got a thing where like I discovered last May or so when things opened up a little bit after being hard lockdown, and one of my favorite places to go just to be away from home was the local Barnes and Noble. And that was like, other than Starbucks, that was like, they call it your third place. It's like, it's not your home, it's not your work, it's that it's that place you go to hang out and just be around other human beings. And I discovered that, waiting around socially distant with temperature checks and masks on while browsing a bookstore actually really sucks. And I tried it a couple, 3 times, then, all those third places went away from me. And I just had to find new places to hang out with different people. But it's like, a big part of my just kind of casual, bookish social life went away when you added all this other social baggage to it. And I hope some of that's still left. We're going to find new ones, but we'll be rebuilding. Mike says, my family had an auto parts store. We extended the sort of credit to local farm accounts, kept in stock the product they need to operate, and the farm started failing. We ended up losing. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Non-fungible token. Thank you, Agent DeCamp. I was close. And Agent also says, I'm not interested in digital only anything. All right, guys, we are running long already. Let me see, was there anything else I absolutely need to go into? I went a little long, and I really did not mean to. It wound up being really interesting to talk about stuff. So yeah, let's. I'm gonna see if I can't reach out to some folks and get a StreamYard thing going to talk about some of the industry issues and do that as a special show in a while. I've definitely have taught some people I've talked to before, and I now know how to actually bring them into a show, so we could do a live back and forth on this one. And I look forward to doing that one. I do want to give a quick shout out, and I did have this set up ahead of time. I want to give an absolute shout out to Robert Wood and some of you guys who are saying corrections. I don't know if you guys are noticing this at all, but oh my God, the corrections have been coming in so hard lately. I actually, so a little behind the scenes stuff. We found out at one point we made a really big push during we kind of had to get our feet under us with the whole COVID thing, whatever else, with a lot of changing up in our own work habits and things like that. But made a really big push a month or two in to get us on top of corrections. So we were handling the week's corrections every week. They didn't pile up because we got invested with another project or whatever else. And it's like, no, if you submit a correction that week, I want it processed that week. And I really, we all kind of had all hands on deck, and we all leaned on people pretty good on that. One thing I found out is at one point we had like 20,000 pending corrections, and that was just that came in over the course of like 3 weeks. It was nuts. But one thing I found out is that just the time it took in the software to have a list with 20,000 items in it, it would take so many more seconds to even just have that list there and delete one item from that list. And it apparently, I guess the Microsoft List Manager just shuffles all the other ones down by a thing. Even on very fast computers, it was just so sluggish doing that. I found out that we could, notably, over the course of a weekday, you picked up half an hour or so. If we just capped it at 5,000, it just made everything so much faster to work with the console. And so, look, on a good day, we only handle 2,000 corrections, right? You sit there and say 2,000 corrections a day, or additions, or new covers, or whatever it is. Yes, it's a stunning amount of data that comes through here. Anyway, regularly I hear from the editors that they are regularly getting plowed in. It's like, yeah, start of the day, we're working all the way through it, and like I really pounded it. It was crazy. I had down to 3,000, and then I went and closed the program, went to lunch, came back, and it was back up to 5,000. It's like, damn. Anyway, you some folks out there, I want to give some shout outs to some folks, Robert Wood in particular. Guy, you are astonishing. I cannot believe how much content you are giving us to chew on and work with. And when you do that, it also allows us to get that into the system, get it, it then generates pricing data and so forth. So it does feedback in a good way, so you know what the market is saying on that sort of thing. But thank you so much for all that work. Yes, it's making our editors crazy. Keep doing it. You're doing terrific. And for all of us, we went, it was, God, I want to say it was just a little over a month or two ago that we cracked 900,000 issues in the database. I looked at right before showtime today, we were at 920,000. If you take all the different items we've got, because I'm only counting comic books for the bragging rights, because it's called ComicBase. We're into the ballpark where the next major figure that you'll hear us bragging about it's either going to be we'll probably do a 925,000 comics, but pretty soon we're talking about million, as far as the number of items that we're tracking in the whole thing. And at that point, that's just nuts. So thank you so much, everyone who's contributed data. And then lastly, just a heads up. We are just about ready to pull the trigger and release a big, probably the biggest ever Rev to Atomic Avenue. You will be seeing, and I'm allowed to say this, full-on areas for books and magazines, finally, for sale on the system, which also means if you have books or magazines in your copy of ComicBase, pay attention, especially after this week's update. When you download an update, it gives you a little summary at the end. It says, this is how your collection moved in terms of value. And if you have any items in your collection that don't match exactly their description and their comic type and designation in ComicBase's master file, you get a little blue line that says, unknown items, and you can click on and get a report of everything that's a little off from what we expect it to be. Have a real good look at that in the next couple weeks, because we are moving a shed load, is I believe how the Brits say it, of items are going from being pinup / art book comics, which is how they were traditionally done. They're moving into being what they really are, which is books, specifically art books. So get ready, if you've got a bunch of those things in your collection, to have a lot of those stop being recognized as comic books, because they never really were. It's just we only used to have comic books. but they're going to be moving categories. So when that happens to you, go use the comic under the file menu. I believe it's the file menu. It's let me show you what that looks like. If I can pull up ComicBase, if I can find it. There we go. Let's pull this up on the other screen. Oh my God, I've really been talking. Well, thank God for picture-in-picture, so you can actually see me waving at this thing all this time. So let me pull up. And yes, I've sold new items. Let me pull up ComicBase and move it to the other monitor so y'all can see it. All right, over here. Okay. Let's say if the recount had become, let's say it was really an art book and I need to make it one, really what you'll see is something like the art of Armando, this guy, right? Okay, so like this right here, the art of Armando Huerta, which I'm not personally familiar, but apparently he likes drawing women. Awesome. Not actually a comic. It's pictures of girls, right? So what you're gonna want to do is go into the edit menu and say change title media type and just make it a book. At which point it's going to go and change its type of category and do some basic mapping on the whole thing. One thing you probably want to do while you're at it is also do some basic checking and say, was this a numbered series or not? That's going to be the thing that's different the most often. And if it's not, if it really was just a one-off, double click on it and uncheck part of a numbered series. And that way it'll lose the numeric part of its issue number and it'll just become a trade paperback or whatever. But get ready to do that on a fair number of items like that in the next week or two. That's going to become a thing. Just, yeah, heads up on that. But the upside of that one is once you've done that and you mark them as for sale, then when you go to Atomic Avenue, there's a whole brand new book section along with all the newly arrived and newly for sale stuff, and your stuff is going to get, you know, spotlighted in a way that it never was on Atomic Avenue before, and so you'll probably be able to move a bunch of those things if you're of a mind to, and for that matter, you'll be able to find ones that you're, you know, looking to fill in. So that's a cool thing. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you dig the new system. I don't want to say anything until, you know, until we're definitely there, but we're looking pretty good right now, so hopefully I can show it to you very very short order. Okay, is there anything else we need to deal with right now in the chat? More talking about NFTs, awesome. Greg wants to remind us, yes, we have a dedicated thread in, turn on the thing here, in the CV message boards. We can request live stream topics and demos. Excellent, definitely do that. And I think that will do it. And yes, and just as had a few magazines that weren't in the master database, I wasn't planning on submitting them. Please do. Yes, please do. It's right now the books and magazines have had kind of a center of gravity around arts and pop culture. Realistically, I don't care if they're Better Homes and Gardens or Musician Magazine. If they're of interest to you, chances are they're going to be of interest to somebody else. So go ahead and put them in. We'd love to see that. All right, and Andre, yes, I did finally look at the catalog. Thank you so much for that. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for attending, and right now I'm going to celebrate having got my dang COVID shot. I'm going to pour myself 2 fingers of a very nice Macallan and, you know, and probably have a really decent cigar. So, guys, take care, you know, good health, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.